Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffe.
And Michael, as promised, at this point in the program, we are joined by our very special guest, Dr. J. Robert McClure III. And Bob, welcome to the Florida Roundtable.
Thank you for having me.
Bob is the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute, which is headquartered in Tallahassee. And Jim, before we get into all of that, I want you to go ahead and take the first minute or so and tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal background, and how you came to the James Madison Institute.
Well, I have been at the James Madison Institute for a little over 11 years. And in that time, we have been very fortunate to grow quite a bit over the kind of in conjunction with the growth of the state. We're a free market think tank based in Tallahassee, but we have offices also in Orlando and also in Naples because, we're in a state of nearly 20 million people, as you all know. And so we've sought to expand our influence, hopefully, in terms of public policy. And it's been a really, really terrific ride. I have a terrific leadership team, board of directors. Both of you all know former House Speaker Alan Bentz, who's the chairman of our board. Other folks like John Kirtley, who's been at the forefront of education reform in the state of Florida, and some other folks around the state. And it's been, the James Madison Institute we believe, of course I'm biased, that we've kind of been at the center of the great debates regarding public policy in Florida, is at the center of the national debates. And so we're really excited about the future and where we are currently.
Well, and now you are no stranger to state government. Former Governor Jeb Bush had put you on the Florida Elections Commission, and you've got considerable government service yourself.
A little bit, yes, I do. The Governor Bush, I served on the Florida Elections Commission. I was appointed nationally, served on the Florida State Committee for the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. I have been fortunate enough to be appointed to economic teams to various cabinet officers, including the governor, and transition teams and whatnot. And so it's, some might say it's in my blood. Little known fact, my great uncle was Senate President in 1955. There was Senate President in 1917. The only father-son combination to be Senate President, and then my great-grandfather went on to serve as an extra Florida Supreme Court justice during the Depression when they had so much litigation going on. So it's kind of in my blood, and it's been a great ride.
Lots of history in the family. Very impressive. I'm bound to ask before we get into the issues and whatnot, why was it determined, the philosophy or the notions, the choosing of the name the James Madison Institute?
Well, I think it's, and many folks see James Madison as kind of one of the underappreciated founding fathers, responsible for many of our founding documents that your listeners know and understand. And Madison, the man, really felt like that the proper role of government was to be limited, to kind of lay the ground rules and then allow men and women to work together, to contract together, to live together, and that this notion of freedom in the 18th century was kind of radical at the time. We all take it for granted now. And so James Madison truly believed in the proper role of government, which was to be limited so that individuals could have more freedom. And both of you all know J. Stanley Marshall. As I pivot there for just a second, Dr. Marshall, former president of Florida State in the late 60s and the early 70s, founded the James Madison Institute in 1987 because he saw or felt like what he saw that was coming out of the academy at that time was just advocacy for more and bigger and larger government. And there was no alternative voice. And so you began to see these state-based think tanks around the country begin to crop up as an alternate voice to this kind of belief in the growth of government. And it's not coincidence. It's not a coincidence that that was also happening during the Reagan years, when President Reagan so eloquently voiced the importance of liberty and freedom. And really, as he said, oftentimes government it doesn't solve the problem; it is the problem. And so Dr. Marshall saw the James Madison Institute as an alternative, and hence took the name of the founding father who shared those beliefs as well.
So, do you see any James Madisons out there today in our political atmosphere, or is that long dead?
Great question. I see glimpses of those James Madisons in various people. And I think, look, even though we are a think tank, we're not naive to politics and politicians. And, their job oftentimes is to get reelected. Not oftentimes, all the time. They work to get reelected. So nobody sure, but again, to quote Reagan, if I agree with you 80% of the time, you're 80% my friend, not 20% my enemy, and we understand that. So we've been fortunate enough to work with folks on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, whether it's, former Senator Bob Graham or, Governor Jeb Bush, whether it's the members of the Black Caucus, Democratic Caucus in the state legislature on criminal justice or education reform, or the Republican majority on Medicaid, stopping Medicaid expansion. Our goal, we're not party-based. We're nonpartisan in the truest sense of the word. So to answer your question, I think you have seen glimpses of this from very varying folks. I think the governor has been terrific on taxes and the regulatory environment. We disagreed with him on a couple of things in terms of, Medicaid and whatnot. But again, it's about policy, not personalities. And so that's been our focus for the 27 years we've been at it.
Well, now, Bob, the Florida legislature getting set to come back into action here early in the new year. And the notion that a lot of eyes all around the country are going to be focused on Tallahassee and what our legislature is doing. So bring us in on your role and the Institute and your feelings about all this.
Well, it's an interesting time to live in the state of Florida. As we all know, we last December or so, we surpassed New York as the third largest state of the country. In the country, if you look at our demographics, the entire country is here. If you look at the percentages of minority populations, of military, of retirees, of urban and rural, whatever the case may be, Florida really is the epicenter of public policy and politics, and not just because Governor Bush and Senator Rubio are running for president, but for all of the reasons I've just mentioned. Throw in the fact that it's the fourth largest economy in the country, and if Florida were its own country, it'd be the 18th largest world economy, and that's a fascinating idea. And so what happens here from a public policy standpoint has national implications. And so this legislative session is going to be very important going forward. As I mentioned previously, taxes and regulations, some water issues, health care, all of those kinds of things, the reach of the EPA, the federal government into the states, which I think was never envisioned by the founders, whether it's, clean power plants or waters of the U.S. These are going to be some of the major issues facing our state legislature. And so it's going to be interesting going forward.
Is there, in talking about specifics, what specifically would the James Madison Institute want to do in terms of taxes? You had mentioned taxes there. What do you see for the future of Florida in taxes? What needs to change, or does anything need to change?
Well, I think he's done a really, really nice job. He has reduced the tax burden on thousands of small businesses around the state, and you've seen, and the regulations as well. So you've seen the what happens when those things occur. And so I think going forward, it's going to be important to protect what we have in Florida from a tax and regulatory environment. There's always the opportunity for constitutional mandates or carve outs on the part of individual businesses and whatnot. And so Florida needs to, the state legislature needs to protect against that and create and keep a level playing field. But the governor has done a terrific job on that, and I think it's important to understand that, in the last 18 months, the last 2 years it might be, Florida's created roughly 12% of the nation's jobs, and it's because the governor has done an excellent job of reducing taxes on small businesses and reducing regulations. And then the promotion of the ports and trade and whatnot with Central and South America as well.
Now, what kind of role, in other words, do you lobby the legislatures or are you dealing in putting this philosophy out to the public? What is the James Madison role in all this?
Great question. We don't lobby at all. Our focus is on educating Floridians across the state and also to testify as kind of an expert on various issues. What we like to call ourselves is kind of the honest broker on various issues. So if legislators are struggling with what to do on Medicaid expansion, for example, last year is a perfect example, on tax credit scholarship programs for educational choice or those kinds of things. We are kind of the honest broker who does the research, writes the papers, who then presents and can testify on what is good policy to continue to expand Florida's economy, to continue to watch graduation rates and reading scores go up. And that's our focus. We're the honest broker. We don't lobby. We're a 501c3. But then the second component.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bob, hang on
Yeah.
to that. We'll let you come back to that because the clock says we've got to take a little bit of a break here along our network line. Let us remind folks that this is the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffe.
Our very special guest this day is Dr. J. Robert McClure III. He's the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute with headquarters in Tallahassee. And if you'll stay put, our conversation continues following these messages. From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffe.
And our very special guest is Dr. Bob McClure III. He is the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute in Tallahassee, the free market think tank. That's what I was looking for there. But folks doing a marvelous job, and Bob, thank you for being with us this day. You were about to make another point. We were talking about the Florida legislature, and I wanted to let you go back and finish up that thought about focusing on the education of Floridians to our statewide issues.
You're right. That's exactly right. It's interesting. What many of your listeners may not know is that in addition to being the fourth largest economy in the country and the 18th largest in the world, because of this kind of light hand of government, we would call it, you have seen billions and billions of dollars migrate from other states into the state of Florida, which helps create jobs, helps increase and improve economic prosperity, whether it's 23, 25 billion from New York, 15 billion from New Jersey, 10 billion from Illinois. You're seeing people and their money move to the state of Florida to live and work and create jobs. And I think that's the role of the legislature, is to allow that to continue so that we can continue to have a improved quality of life. Our job at the Institute is not only to be the honest broker at the legislature, but it's also to educate this roughly 20 billion heterogeneous population in the Sunshine State on what works in terms of jobs, economic prosperity. And as you both know, as veterans of this for many years, if Florida were its own country, it could almost be divided up into 10 or 12 city-states. And each city-state is unique in personality. And so our challenge at JMI, and the reason we have offices also in Orlando and Naples, is to work in those areas to educate Floridians on the importance and the goal of economic freedom.
Is there anything that the legislature has done recently maybe that you guys did not approve of, that you guys were strongly against?
Well, that's a good question. We've had some serious disagreements with some folks. To answer your question, as I think it through, we would like them to sometimes go further than they do. There are, various sometimes, carve outs in those final 3 or 4 or 5 days that, kind of rush and get buried in there for various groups that we wish there was less of that. And if none of that, at the national level, they call them earmarks. That's not the official term at the state legislature. So there are those kinds of things we wish they would do differently. We wish they would be more bold in certain areas in terms of education reform, the use of Amendment $1, different things like that. And then I also think each body has its own unique personality. The House appears to be more center right, more further to the right, much more focused in that way. The Senate is more deliberate. We would argue at the James Madison Institute oftentimes too deliberate, but we have worked and have good friends in that body as well that have done terrific work. So my overall answer would be I wish they would actually be far more bold and then in addition to that, do away with some of these, things that are tucked in towards the end and carve-outs and whatnot.
I'm going to digress here for just a moment because I happen to know that you have been named just recently amongst the top 100 movers and shakers in Florida. That's it's quite an honor, and I want you to talk about that for a minute.
Well, thank you very much for acknowledging that. I'm grateful. My very first board chairman who hired me 11 years ago was a gentleman named Charles Hilton out of the Panhandle in Panama City. He was very active in state politics, but he was a businessman and never actually ran for anything. And if there ever was a self-made man, he was it. But he said, I remember one of the first pieces of advice he gave me, he said, there's no such thing as a self-made man. So whatever mover and shaker, top 100 influencer, whatever the title is, it's because of a terrific staff at the Institute and a great leadership team of board of directors led by our board chairman, former Speaker Alan Bentz. And so it's the honor there may have my name on it, but it's actually very much a team effort with everyone involved with the James Madison Institute. And our growth, I think, and our influence is a reflection of the good people associated with us.
Well said, and congratulations on being in that group of influential folks. Back to the legislature, what is on the JMI agenda, if I can call it that? Any specific important items that you want to see come out of or get accomplished in this coming session?
Yes, there are several. We're always focused on important offense, sometimes defense. I think in the realm of education, it's going to be important to protect and expand Florida's tax credit scholarship program. It's the largest in the country. There are some court battles taking place currently, and we would like to see the state legislature expand the corporate tax scholarship program because it helps those families who don't have the opportunity to pick and choose the best school for their children. And you've seen reading scores go up and graduation rates go through the roof, in part because of this element of school choice. That's one issue that I think is incredibly important.
Could you remind our listeners exactly what that scholarship program is? What
Sure.
exactly is entailed in that?
The tax credit scholarship is a program for families at a certain income level. And what can happen is corporations can donate money to a third-party entity, and there are several in the state of Florida, and get a tax credit for that. They can get a reduction in their tax bill, hence the name, the Tax Credit Scholarship Program. And then that third-party entity uses those dollars as scholarships and gives those scholarship dollars to families so that they can send their children. They can use those dollars not just to pay for tuition, because they may just want to go to the best public school in their town, but for transportation and other things like that. And so it was implemented by Governor Bush during his first term in office. And it allows families who may not otherwise have the ability to do so to pick and choose the best school for their son or daughter. And it might be the best public school down the road. They just can't get there. It might be a charter school. It might be a parochial school. And it's just a terrific, terrific program. Largest one in the entire country, over 70,000 kids involved. And what you've seen in the last 20 years since its implementation, 18 years, is you have seen reading scores for minority students go through the roof. You've seen graduation rates go through the roof, and it's a program that is proven to work. Choice and accountability work in education when they're put in place properly, and we've seen that here in the state of Florida as really a leader for the country in this area.
Now, any other points? We've got about 2 minutes before we have to pause again, but maybe you can squeeze one in here.
Sure. Obviously, we mentioned the governor's he's got a tax package that we're really interested in that I think is going to be important. Continue to reduce regulations, to lower to raise the threshold of who is governed by certain taxes and regulations. And that's going to be important going forward. I also think championing healthcare alternatives to both Obamacare and Medicaid expansion will, even though the House did not expand Medicaid and we agreed with that, that's going to continue to be an ongoing debate because Obamacare costs are skyrocketing. People are covered, but they don't have access to health care. So health care is going to continue to be a huge issue, and we think market-driven answers are far better than just another government program. That's another issue going forward, and then there are a number of others coming up as well.
Well, of course. Is 60 days enough?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So when a lot of folks talk about Florida's now the third largest state, and maybe the legislature needs to spend, they do actually, but the formal session itself, they have their committees and whatnot. But there's also been talk about expanding the legislature into more than a 60-day session. Well, tell you what, we have to take another pause along our network line here. We're going to remind folks that they are listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffe.
Our very special guest this day is Dr. J. Robert McClure III. He is in Tallahassee, where they have the headquarters of the James Madison Institute. It is a free market think tank and made up some very influential people with some important things to say about our state of Florida and about the nation itself. And we invite you to stay put. We're going to continue this conversation following these messages. We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffe.
Our very special guest this day is Dr. Bob McClure III, the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute in Tallahassee.
Yeah, and I was just wondering, Dr. McClure, you talked earlier about how your institute is very focused on educating the public, especially in Florida, about the things that need to happen. And I was just curious, in what ways do you actually educate the public?
Well, with the dynamics of the state of Florida, it's always an interesting and fun challenge. And we do it really across the board. Our focus is on teaching young people about founding principles of this country and how they apply primarily to economics. And the idea that freedom and liberty and the rule of law, when properly understood, create economic prosperity and economic freedom for everyone. It gives everyone an opportunity to follow the American dream, regardless of race, regardless of origin, or whatever the case may be. And so those are kind of our founding principles. And we do this in a number of different ways. We have a tremendous outreach program to young people. We do dozens and dozens of events, everything from Benjamin Franklin reenactors to the celebration of Constitution Day at both the middle and high school level, and also at the college level. We have reached, probably in the last 6 years, over nearly 800,000 middle, high school, and college kids with this message of economic freedom and the messages related to founding principles. We're on about 10 Florida college campuses. We have JMI representatives on each of those campuses. They're responsible for curriculum. They're responsible for events. We do those kinds of things all around the state. We then have a new program that we implemented. We have a Young Leaders program called the Leaders Fellows, and it's modeled on Leadership Orlando or Leadership Tampa or Leadership Florida. And we've just started our second class, and it's for young professionals under the age of 40 who go through a curriculum and programming for an entire year, understanding the principles of economics and the founding principles of our forefathers as well. And so after this second class, we will have educated over 100 young professionals under the age of 40. And then we have lots and lots of events around the state focused on all Floridians, regardless of age, regardless of where you live and who you are. We probably do 200 events a year around the state. We do radio and television, just as we're doing right now. And then we have lots and lots of curriculum and policy points that we distribute as well throughout the state of Florida. So, it's kind of a cradle to grave. Jokingly, we say that educational process, understanding these values that really allow all of us to chase the American dream.
And some publishing as well. So, I don't know, a year or so ago, maybe not quite that much. Lynne Cheney, who many people, Dick Cheney's wife, many people don't know, has a doctorate in history, wrote a massive volume on James Madison that you folks assisted in the promotion of. I was privileged to do a fairly extensive interview with her, and so there's that kind of outreach as well.
You're absolutely right. We have the opportunity to have that kind of outreach with publications. We have our scholarly journal. In that case, with the book by Lynne Cheney on James Madison, is a very accessible biographical read on our namesake. It's terrific. It's just a terrific book. And so we're able to do those things as well. You're absolutely right, Reagan. And the other thing I would add is that given our state's prominence, it also gives us the opportunity to take kind of a best practices idea to other states. The corporate tax scholarship program being one example. Take it to other states and show them how they can also institute that in their states. And then it gives us the platform to go to Washington. As dysfunctional as it may be, it's still important for us to have a voice there as well, given the fact that we're the hometown think tank in the most important state in the country when it comes to policy and politics. We also have the opportunity to go to Washington as well. And so there's a huge platform out there, and we're very excited about where we're heading.
And I'm bound to ask you this, with 5 of the Republican presidential candidates maintaining residences in Florida, reaction from you folks. This has never happened before.
It really is amazing. It really is. People, some Floridians think, well, they just think of Marco and Jeb, but you're absolutely right. With everyone else who also makes their home here, I think it speaks to 2 things. One, it's an incredible place to live, not only for its economic environment, but because of its beauty. as well, and uniqueness in terms of everything about the culture here, the rich culture of the great state of Florida, the diverse culture. That's one. But I also think, secondly, it speaks to that economic component of people wanting to live in a state where they feel valued and they feel like they have an opportunity at the American dream. So
Bob,
having those five candidates on there just puts a bullseye on the state of Florida and makes all of your listeners makes us all more responsible for the future of this country. And I think that's really important.
absolutely. And a busy, busy year ahead. Bob, we want to thank you for all of your time this day. We know that you are a busy man. We hope that the next time you're in Orlando, perhaps we can get you up here in person in the studio with us. We'd like that very much.
I look forward to it, gentlemen. Thank you both.
Dr. Bob McClure, the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute. This is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Michael Yaffe.
And we'll be back with a brief closing thought following these messages. We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffe.
And a pleasure to have Bob McClure with us. Bob has been long associated with the James Madison Institute, and of course now he is the president and CEO. I look forward to a visit to Orlando and seeing if we can get him here in the studio with us.